Pay close attention. This is how magic works. The magician waves his right hand, drawing your eye with a flash of light, a dramatic flourish. And while every eye is fixed on the misdirection, the left hand, in silence, executes the real trick. On the grand stage of geopolitics, the trick is the same. The media circus is focused entirely on Iran, the endless saga of its nuclear program, the sanctions, the threats, and on the other side of the stage, Saudi Arabia, with its petrodollars and newfound ambitions, plays its own part in the drama. This is the show they want you to watch. The eternal conflict between Persians and Arabs, Sunnis and Shias. It is the perfect misdirection. But while the spotlights are aimed at the desert, the real storm is gathering elsewhere. Not in a pariah state or a desert kingdom, but inside the house itself. At the very heart of NATO, the magician's left hand, the one nobody is watching, is quietly assembling the most destabilizing weapon of the 21st century. And that hand belongs to a man with the ambition of a sultan and the cunning of a grandmaster chess player, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. They will tell you that Turkey is a vital ally, the southern pillar of NATO. They will tell you its nuclear energy program is for peaceful purposes, to power its growing cities. And as with any good magic trick, there's a kernel of truth to make the lie plausible. Yes, Turkey is building the Akkuyu nuclear power plant on its Mediterranean coast. But what they don't highlight on the evening news is who is building it. It isn't an American, German, or French company. It is Rosatom, Russia's state-owned nuclear conglomerate. Think about that for a moment. A key member of NATO, an alliance created to contain Russia, is handing Moscow the keys to its most sensitive energy infrastructure. It is a nuclear Trojan horse in plain sight, a complex design, built, and set to be operated by the Russians, giving them unprecedented leverage over a NATO member. But the true genius of the plan goes far beyond simple energy blackmail. What is being built at Akkuyu is not just a reactor. It is the nursery for a weapons program. Erdogan has never truly hidden his intentions. In 2019, he told the world, in a speech to his own party, some countries have missiles with nuclear warheads, not one or two. But we can't have them. I cannot accept this. The confession was there. For anyone willing to listen, it wasn't the complaint of a statesman. It was the declaration of intent from a man who sees himself as the restorer of an empire. They call it a civilian program. We call it the most brilliant and dangerous play on the geopolitical chessboard in a century. And the world is about to be put in checkmate by an ally. The official story sold to the public and to the bureaucrats in Brussels is simple. Akkuyu is a VVER-1-00 light water reactor designed purely for electricity generation. It is, they claim, the good kind of reactor, one that is difficult to use for military purposes. They will point to international safeguards, to IAEA inspections, and to Turkey's signature on the Non-Proliferation Treaty as ironclad proof of its peaceful intentions. This narrative is not just misleading, it is a deliberate, calculated lie designed to provide political cover for a deeply sinister reality. To understand the deception, you have to understand the fundamental nature of nuclear weapons. There are the primary paths to a bomb, enriching uranium to weapons grade, or reprocessing spent nuclear fuel to extract plutonium. While Iran has focused on the difficult path of enrichment, the Akkuyu plant, once operational, provides Turkey with a direct, ready-made route to the second path, plutonium. Every light water reactor, as a natural byproduct of its operation, produces plutonium in its spent fuel rods. For a normal country, this spent fuel is a radioactive waste product, a headache to be stored and secured. But for a country with military ambitions, that spent fuel is a gold mine. The critical technology needed is a reprocessing facility, a chemical plant designed to separate this weapons-grade plutonium from the other waste materials. Officially, Turkey has no such facility. But this is where the Russian connection becomes so crucial. The deal Turkey signed with Rosatom is unprecedented for a NATO nation. It's a build-own-operate model, meaning Russia doesn't just build the plant, it owns and runs it. And most importantly, it manages the nuclear fuel cycle. Moscow has complete, intimate knowledge and control over every gram of fissile material that goes in and comes out of that reactor. Why would Russia, the primary adversary of NATO, agree to build and operate such a sensitive facility for a key NATO member? Is it simply for profit? That is the naive explanation. The strategic explanation is far more logical and far more terrifying. By helping Turkey develop the infrastructure and technical know-how for a nuclear program, Russia achieves a monumental strategic victory. It inserts a wedge of discord and mistrust deep into the heart of the NATO alliance. Russia can hold the program hostage, but it can also secretly facilitate it. A few missing fuel rods here, a loss of fissile material there. Technical knowledge quietly shared between Russian and Turkish scientists. Under the guise of operational training, it can all happen far from the prying eyes of Western inspectors. The Akkuyu plan itself is the perfect cover. It provides a legitimate reason for Turkey to import nuclear technology, to train a generation of nuclear physicists and engineers, and to experiment with the handling of radioactive materials. It creates the entire scientific and industrial ecosystem necessary for a weapons program, all under the peaceful banner of civilian energy. This is the Trojan horse. The shiny, gift-trapped reactor is wheeled through the gates of NATO, celebrated as a sign of progress and energy independence. But hidden inside are the tools, the knowledge, and the intent to build a bomb, all with the quiet complicity of the West's greatest rival. The safeguards are a fantasy. The inspections are political theater. The only thing that matters is capability and intent. The intent was declared by Erdogan himself. The capability is being delivered, piece by piece, by Vladimir Putin. To understand why Turkey is willing to play this dangerous nuclear game, you must first understand the mind of its leader. The Western media, in its typical simplistic fashion, often portrays Recep Tayyip Erdogan as a mere strong man, another authoritarian leader clinging to power. This is a fundamental and dangerous misreading of the man and his vision. He is not just a politician, he sees himself as a historical figure, a restorer of glory, the architect of a new Turkish century. This isn't about winning the next election. This is about reversing the humiliations of the past 100 years and re-establishing Turkey as the dominant civilizational power it once was under the Ottoman sultans. His ambition is not just regional, it is imperial, and for a man with such a vision, conventional power is never enough. The proof of this grand strategy is not hidden in secret documents. It is written in plain sight across the battlefields and diplomatic tables of the last decade. While the West was distracted, Turkey methodically expanded its sphere of influence with a newly assertive and independent foreign policy. Look at the evidence. In Syria, Turkish forces carved out a massive zone of control, defying both Washington and Moscow. In Libya, Turkish drones and military advisors single-handedly turned the tide of a civil war, establishing a major foothold in North Africa. In the Caucasus, it was Turkey's Bayraktar drones that ensured Azerbaijan's victory over Armenia in Nagorno-Karabakh, redrawing the map of a region Russia once considered its exclusive backyard. These were not isolated actions, they were calculated moves in a grand strategy, projecting Turkish power far beyond its borders and demonstrating a willingness to act unilaterally, with or without the approval of its so-called NATO allies. This ambition is further codified in what they call the Blue Homeland Doctrine, or Mavi Vatan. It is an aggressive, expansionist maritime claim over vast swathes of the eastern Mediterranean and the Aegean, putting Turkey on a direct collision course with its fellow NATO member, Greece. It is a declaration that Turkey will no longer be confined to its shores, that it intends to dominate the energy resources and sea lanes of the region, by force if necessary. Underpinning this entire strategy is the stunning rise of Turkey's own military-industrial complex. The world saw the power of their drones, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. Turkey is now building its own warships, its own advanced missiles, its own attack helicopters, and even its own prototype stealth fighter. This is a deliberate policy of achieving technological sovereignty, of breaking the shackles of dependency on Western arms suppliers. It is a necessary prerequisite for any nation planning to develop a secret weapons program outside the purview of its allies. When a nation can build its own world-class advanced weaponry, it signals that it has the scientific, engineering, and industrial base to pursue far more sensitive projects in secret. For a leader with the ambition of a sultan, a powerful conventional army and an independent arms industry are critical, but they are not the final piece of the puzzle. To truly guarantee his nation's sovereignty, to deter any superpower from interfering in his sphere of influence, and to sit at the global table as an equal to the leaders in Washington, Beijing, and Moscow, he needs the ultimate currency of power. He needs the ultimate symbol of national prestige and invulnerability. He needs a nuclear weapon. The bomb is not merely a tool of defense for Erdogan's Turkey, it is the final, essential component of his imperial restoration project. It is the scepter that completes the Sultan's regalia. The ambition is clear. The pattern of behavior is undeniable. The capability is being secretly assembled under the cover of a civilian energy program. The only remaining question is the most disturbing of all. Why is the West, and specifically NATO, the most powerful military alliance in human history, allowing this to happen? Why are they turning a blind eye as one of their own members breaks the ultimate taboo and conspires with their chief adversary to do it? Are they truly this blind? Or is it something far worse? Are they complicit? The logical question any rational person would ask is, how can the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the most powerful and sophisticated military alliance in human history, with its continent-spanning intelligence networks and its multi-trillion-dollar defense budget, be so utterly blind to a threat emerging from within its own ranks? The simple answer, the one you might hear from a naive academic, is that they are incompetent or simply distracted. That is a comforting thought. It is also completely wrong. The truth is far more damning. They are not blind. They are paralyzed. What we are witnessing is not a failure of intelligence, but a catastrophic failure of political will, a strategic bankruptcy born from fear, cynicism, and a deeply ingrained imperial arrogance. The leadership in Brussels and Washington sees the writing on the wall. They know about the Russian-built reactor. They have read the same transcripts of Erdogan's speeches. They see his ambition. They choose to ignore it because they are terrified of the alternative. The central fear that has gripped the heart of the Western establishment is the fear of losing Turkey. In the grand chess game against Russia and China, Turkey is one of the most important pieces on the board. It controls the Bosphorus and Dardanelles Straits, the only maritime passage from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, giving it a literal chokehold on Russian naval power. It has the second largest army in NATO. It borders Syria, Iraq, and Iran. From a purely geopolitical perspective, a Turkey that formally abandons NATO and aligns with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization would be a strategic nightmare from which the West might never recover. Erdogan knows this, and he is using it as the ultimate blackmail. He has calculated correctly that the West is more afraid of him leaving the alliance than they are of him building a bomb within it. Every time a European leader thinks of sanctioning Ankara, or a U.S. official considers cutting off military sales, they are confronted with this paralyzing thought. What if this is the push that sends him running to Moscow for good? And so they do nothing. They issue weak statements of concern. They hold pointless meetings. They continue the charade that Turkey is a reliable partner, all while knowing it is playing a double game. This paralysis is compounded by the internal rot within the alliance itself. NATO is no longer a unified body with a singular purpose. It is a fractured collection of national interests. The Eastern European states care only about the Russian land threat. The Southern European states, like Italy and Greece, are consumed by the migration crisis. And the bloc's economic heart, Germany, is too terrified of disrupting trade to take any meaningful stand. There is no consensus, no unified will to confront a rogue member. It is easier for everyone to kick the can down the road, to pretend the problem is manageable, and to hope it doesn't blow up on their watch. For Washington, this policy of deliberate ignorance is dressed up in the language of risk management. The cynical calculation in the State Department and the Pentagon is that a nuclear Turkey which remains, at least on paper, a member of NATO is a lesser evil than a nuclear Turkey fully allied with China and Russia. They cling to the arrogant belief that they can somehow manage or contain a nuclearized Erdogan, that his interests will ultimately align with theirs. This is the same imperial hubris that led to disastrous miscalculations in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq. The belief that they can control the forces they unleash. And for the leaders in Paris, Berlin, and other European capitals, the calculus is even more craven. They are outsourcing their border security to Erdogan, paying him billions of euros to keep millions of refugees from crossing into Europe. He holds the migration floodgates, and they know he can open them at any moment to create a political crisis that could topple their governments. The unspoken price for his cooperation is their silence. They are trading their continent's long-term nuclear security for short-term political stability. They are not blind. They are willing hostages. And so, the path is cleared for the Sultan to achieve his ambition. He knows NATO is too divided to act. He knows Europe is too weak to object. and he knows America is too afraid to risk losing him. Now that we understand why the Watchmen are deliberately looking away, we must confront the world they are creating. What happens when the Sultan finally holds the ultimate weapon in his hands? What does the new map of power look like when the third nuclear power in the Middle East is a rogue NATO ally? For a century, the world has operated on a map of the Middle East drawn by victorious Western powers. In the aftermath of World War I, it was a map of straight lines drawn in the sand, of client states and spheres of influence, all underpinned by a balance of power ultimately guaranteed by Washington. The moment Turkey achieves a nuclear breakout capability, that map is set on fire. It is not merely a new weapon entering the stage. It is the dawn of a new, terrifying, and violently unpredictable era. The old order, with its familiar rivalries and American police red lines, will be gone forever. In its place will emerge a three-way nuclear standoff, a strategic nightmare that makes the old Israel-Iran dynamic look like a simple, stable chessboard. Imagine the impossible calculations for Israeli military planners. For decades, their entire national security doctrine has been built around maintaining a qualitative edge and a nuclear monopoly against a coalition of Arab states and, later, a hostile Iran. Now, they face a second nuclear-armed rival, but this one is not a declared enemy. It is a member of NATO, integrated into the Western military command structure. How do you deter a nation that is technically your ally's ally? How do you prepare for a conflict with a country that has access to NATO intelligence and technology? The Samson option, already degraded by the rise of Iran, becomes almost meaningless in a world with a nuclear Turkey. It is a strategic checkmate from which there is no escape. This new reality fundamentally breaks the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The entire premise of NATO is Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all. It is a pact of mutual, collective defense. What happens to that pact when one member, Turkey, holds the ultimate offensive weapon and is actively engaged in aggressive maritime disputes with another member, Greece? If a conflict were to erupt in the Aegean Sea, who would the alliance side with? How could NATO function when one of its own has the power to blackmail the entire continent? With the threat of nuclear escalation, the alliance would be rendered impotent, a hollowed-out shell, unable to act against its rogue member for fear of its own annihilation. Article 5 would become the longest suicide note in history. The Black Sea, for centuries a contested waterway, would effectively become a Turkish lake, with a nuclear arsenal to back up its conventional navy and its control of the Bosphorus Strait. Turkey could dictate terms to every other nation on its shores. Russia's naval access to the Mediterranean, its lifeline to Syria and beyond, would exist solely at the whim of Ankara. The energy pipelines that are the economic lifeblood of Europe would be under the shadow of a new, unpredictable nuclear power. But the ambition of the Sultan does not stop at his borders. A nuclear bomb is not just a military weapon, it is the ultimate tool of ideological and political influence. For decades, the leadership of the Sunni Muslim world has been contested by the monarchies of the Gulf, primarily Saudi Arabia, with their wealth derived from oil. But wealth is not the same as power. By achieving what no Arab state ever has, by building a bomb in defiance of the West, Erdogan would be able to present himself as the true, powerful leader of the Sunni world. He would be the strong man who restored Muslim pride, the one who stood up to the old colonial powers and took his seat at the top table. This newfound prestige would allow him to project his brand of political Islam and Neo-Ottoman influence from North Africa to Central Asia, creating a new power bloc that would challenge both Western and Eastern interests. The old maps will be useless. The old alliances will be dead. A new power will have risen, born from the weakness, fear, and strategic blindness of the West. This is not simply a shift in the balance of power. It is the violent return of an old and powerful idea, an idea the West thought it had safely buried in the ashes of World War I, the ghost of an empire. What we are witnessing is not merely a crisis of non-proliferation. It is not just another chapter in the turbulent history of the Middle East. It is something far more profound. It is the end of a 100-year-long historical cycle. It is the full and final collapse of the post-World War I order, and the violent return of an idea the West thought it had vanquished and buried forever. The ghost of the Ottoman Empire reawakened in the 21st century with thermonuclear power, when Mustafa Kemal Ataturk founded the modern Turkish Republic from the ashes of the empire. He built it on a single, guiding principle: to turn its face towards the West. His vision was of a secular, modern, and inward-looking nation, a bastion of stability integrated into the European political and security architecture. For decades, that vision held. Turkey was the loyal soldier of NATO, the bulwark against Soviet expansion, the model of a modern Muslim democracy. That era is definitively over. The rise of the atomic sultan represents the complete and total inversion of Ataturk's legacy. It is Turkey turning its back on the West and reorienting itself as the center of its own universe. The nuclear weapon is the ultimate symbol of this transformation. It is the final, irrevocable declaration of independence from the Western-led order. It is the tool that ensures Turkey will never again be a client state or a junior partner, but a great power in its own right, playing by its own rules. And how did the West respond to this historic challenge? With the greatest act of strategic malpractice in modern history. Future historians will look back at this period and be baffled. They will see that the West was not defeated by a great adversary in a cataclysmic war. It was defeated by its own apathy, its own internal divisions, and its own lack of conviction. It willingly allowed a strategic competitor to emerge from within its own ranks, armed with the most dangerous weapon on earth. They had the power to stop it. They had the intelligence to see it coming. They lacked only the will. They were so consumed by their fear of Russia, so addicted to the short-term stability provided by their Faustian bargains, that they failed to recognize the far greater, long-term threat gestating inside their own alliance. They chose to appease the Sultan, hoping to keep him in their tent, and in doing so, they allowed him to build the means to burn the whole tent down. The West did not lose a war. It forfeited its leadership of the world order out of cowardice. So, this is the new reality. A shattered and untrustworthy NATO, paralyzed from within. A Middle East not with two, but with three or more rival nuclear powers, turning the region into a permanent powder keg. A newly confident Russia and a quietly satisfied China, watching with approval as their primary global adversary tears itself apart through its own strategic blunders, and at the center of it all, a resurgent Turkey, no longer a bridge between East and West, but a power unto itself, projecting its influence from the Balkans to Central Asia, all under the unchallengeable shield of a nuclear arsenal. The old maps are useless. The old alliances are a fiction. The old rules no longer apply. The Sultan has his bomb. The empire has returned, and the West, which once drew the lines on the maps of the world, now finds itself hopelessly lost in a dangerous new landscape of its own creation. The old world is gone, and the one that is coming is far darker than you can imagine.